I'm delighted to say that I'm in conversation with Joanna Moore, author of Love is the Gift. Now, Joanna is a qualified and registered therapeutic counsellor since 2007, and she runs her own private practice in Fulham. She's also a psychotherapist, an author, and a youth work programme manager. And she lives with a rare, life-threatening autoimmune disease called Addison's disease since 2009. And so having that and having two small children, Joanna felt that there was not enough literature out there to support her own children through the difficult feelings surrounding death. So she wanted to create a tool that could help her own children and, of course, lots and lots of other children too. So she embarked on creating the beautiful and poetical story about Ilana the mermaid. So thank you for joining me here today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sue. I'm excited.
So tell us really about your journey before writing the book, you know, your journey, your career, your life before that led up to it, really.
Okay, I mean, the journey's quite a long one, and I don't want to keep you here forever. But...
No, well, you know, give us a potted version.
Well, I think the thing is that ever since I was a little girl, I have always wanted to write stories and write books. And I actually thought that that was never going to really be possible, because as a child, I really struggled with spelling and I really struggled with reading. And I remember going away for a weekend with a friend of mine in primary school, and her mother said to me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I must have been about 6 or 7. And I said, "Oh, I'd love to be a writer. I love stories and I would love to write stories." And I said, "But I don't think that's going to be possible, because I can't read very well and I can't spell very well." And she was like, "Well, no, that doesn't mean you can't write and you can't do stories." So I've got to say that she was really quite encouraging, and that little sort of seed of encouragement stayed with me. So I really do appreciate the importance of parents and adults giving that little seed of hope to children, even when they feel that they can't do it, and that say, actually, you can. And here I am. Later on, they found out that I was dyslexic, and that wasn't even until secondary school. So I had to slog through all of that, kind of not really knowing what was going on, and it was pretty tough. And here I am down the road, a therapist, a youth worker, and published my first book. So it can be done, even if you're dyslexic. You can do anything you want.
Absolutely. And I love that message. And that's such an important one. Just the seed of encouragement children need, don't they, to fulfill their dreams. And of course, nowadays, with spell checkers and all sorts, spelling is not something that has to hold you back. I mean, it might be more of a challenge to a child that can spell quite quickly and easily, but really you're an inspiration on so many levels around this. And I love that you've mentioned that and brought that up in the conversation straight away, because it shows you that, you know, children that are struggling a bit with spelling, that's not going to hold them back. So let's get to your wonderful book. I mean, why did you think it was important to write a book about grief and death and dying?
I just don't think that there is enough literature on bereavement support for children. You know, there's lots of fun books that people really want to write, but nobody ever wants to talk about the difficult subjects that actually affect everybody. It doesn't matter what your age is, what your culture is, whether you're poor, whether you're rich. It doesn't matter. We're all touched by grief, and it's a real painful experience. And I really understand that it's so difficult for parents, because they struggle with their own feelings around grief and bereavement, and then in turn they really struggle to talk about the subject with their children and tend to put it off, unfortunately, until something happens, until they actually lose somebody that is important and that they love. And sadly, that's when the parent or the carer is in the heart of grief themselves and really struggling. So I think there's a part of me that would really encourage people to have grief literature on the bookshelf and have those open conversations about death and bereavement and grief and feelings, and preferably explore that with your children before anything happens.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that's so important. So you've thought about it, you've preempted it, you're ready yourself.
Yeah, I think the thing is that also because I live with Addison's disease, I live with a condition that, you know, I really could, you know, something could happen to me tomorrow. I could literally sprain my ankle. I could get a stomach bug. I could get a really big fright. That could put me into a crisis. That crisis then could go into a coma and death. And it is as simple as that. And it's a really rapid process when it happens. So I can't have that conversation with my children if I'm in crisis and I'm dying. There isn't a later on. So for me, it's, you know, I plan to be around for a very long time. So, you know, but I would like to have those conversations. I want my children to know that it's okay, that they won't feel, maybe, you know, they might not be feeling very happy, and they might be feeling angry, and there might be a whole heap of things that might be coming up for them. And that's all okay, but at least they can have that conversation with me, you know, and be open about that possibility. And in one way, I feel really quite lucky in one way to have Addison's and to have those conversations with my children, because I always have parents coming to me, local parents from the children's schools, asking me for any sort of like advice, books that they can read for the parents, for the children, different age groups, different resources, you know. And it's so sad. I had somebody recently come up to me telling me about the loss of a father. A young father left the wife and 4 children behind, you know, from age 6 to 16. Another person had lost a child, age 6, and they had another 12-year-old child. And these are all like shocking events that nobody ever thinks that things like this, nobody wants to even think about things like this happening, because it's horrible, it's heart-wrenching. But there's never any dialogue around grief. People even struggle to talk about grief and death around grandparents, which is usually, hopefully, in the line of order. We hope that the young stay, and it's the elderly that sort of do the natural cycle of life. So we don't talk about it enough. Being a youth worker for over 18 years, I certainly realized that there isn't much done, sort of like even sort of in Children's Grief Awareness Week in November. We're not having those conversations. How do you feel? What do you think? What do you feel about death and loss? Have you ever been impacted by it? These are all questions, and children are really open and curious to having these discussions, but they do need the adults around them to support them through this and be available to ask those questions. So that's why I always say, have the literature around you when there's nothing going on, because
it's not so charged. It's not so charged as well either. So what inspired your work? What drove you to write Love is the Gift?
I think there's lots of things that inspired me. I think one of the main person that kind of instigated the writing and the creativity and the heart behind what I wrote was when I lost a very dear person in my life who was like a surrogate mother. She was really very important and very special, and had been part of my life, and is the reason why I speak Spanish, although I have no Spanish heritage. And, you know, my children called her Abuelita Christina, which means granny in Spanish. And she passed away. And I think everything that I was inspired to write came from my heart and went into the pages of the book. So she was certainly my inspiration to writing it.
Which is wonderful, Carry on, sorry.
I think it's the connection of the heart in it.
Yes, very much so. Did it help you in processing it yourself, actually?
There's definitely something healing in writing, and it's certainly always been said that if you have feelings, if you put them on paper, it certainly helps any experience that you go through, because, you know, being a therapist, it really is about those feelings that are within you, is giving them space to come out, and that's what's healing. And if you can do that through writing, or you can do that through therapy, or just having good friends that you can talk to, and children having available adults around them that they can talk to about how they feel, then that's a real healing process in itself.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So tell us then how you arrived at the characters. Why did you use a mermaid? Tell us about the book, really, so people can understand how it works for children and adults who want to read it with them.
Well, I am such a mermaid fan, and I am such a child myself, and anything mystical and magical, I'm right in there. So obviously my first published book had to have an element of fantasy in it. So that's the reason. And the general makeup of the family is taken from my own family. So it's inspired from my own sort of like setting. And obviously we don't have tails. So that's how the inspiration of the characters came into sort of like life.
And the message is wonderful. Tell us about the message, because that's really important, isn't it? The positivity around the memories, really.
Certainly. I mean, you know, the most important thing that I really truly do believe in is that love is such a healing thing, and it's such a healing experience, and it's not something that you can buy. It's something that is experienced, and it's really the key to any healing and any growth. And, you know, we don't want to suffer. We want to be able to live happy and healthy lives. And it's nice that we can take positivity. We don't lose grief, you know, we don't lose the love of the loss of the person. That's this, you know, writing a book isn't to stop people from grieving. Writing the book is really to give people the permission to grieve, to feel okay to grieve, to allow children to say, listen, whatever you're feeling is okay, you know, even if those feelings are what in our society we might call negative feelings, like anger. That it's okay. You might be feeling angry. There might be guilt. Let's talk about it. So it really is about allowing those feelings to come out, and then really remembering the positive things, the things that make, you know, the magical things that we want to keep, that stay alive with us, that we cherish, that we
carry with us, don't we? Yes. Yeah.
And it's beautiful when you know, when you can get to a point with your grief that it doesn't hurt so much, and that actually you can look back fondly, and that might come in tears sometimes. You know, I found myself in Spain over the summer holidays, and they were singing something silly like Viva la España, and you know, I just burst into tears, and the kids were like, are you okay, mummy? And I was like, I'm happy. These are tears of happiness. I just had a really good memory, and they're tears of happiness. And I don't want to ever lose that, because when you love somebody, why would I want to lose that feeling and that connection?
Yeah, and it's important for children to see that. I remember my own father when he died, and my mother died quickly within the same year of each other. And I remember when I used to hear a song, it would just trigger me. I mean, my mum was half Irish, so it would be around St. Patrick's Day, there'd be jigs and reels. She used to play the violin. But, you know, over time, and people don't always realise it takes 18 months to 2 years, really, to process the loss of someone that you've lost dear to you. A lot of people think, oh, you should be over that by now. But it takes as long as it takes. And it can take longer, it can take shorter. There's no ideal time. But, you know, music can trigger you, and happy memories too. And I remember with my own children, you know, crying about a song in the car one day. And then they asked me about it. I said, well, that's because I used to love that song with my dad. We used to dance to that. And then they said, oh, and then they started sharing stories about granddad, and And off we went from there. So it's about being authentic with it, isn't it? And allowing children to see that we too grieve, and that it's okay to feel all these very strong emotions that swirl around. And that's why I think your book can start those big conversations with little people. What sort of age do you think children would be able to enjoy that story as well as them talking about it?
Well, I mean, I've got adults that have said that they've enjoyed it. So,
Yes.
it's certainly universal for everybody, although adults don't generally rush off to buy picture books for themselves in rhyme. But, I set it for age 6 to 11, primary school age.
Yeah.
That's the age that I set it at. And although 11-year-olds might be not into reading picture books, they certainly are still very comfortable to sit next to an adult and go through them and read them with other siblings as well. So they're not against it. And actually, it's kind of making it okay, making a space that is okay to be able to talk about it. So really I think, parents and carers are able to know their children. Different children take to different literature. Different children have different needs. You said somewhere that it's really, and I completely agree with this, it's really important, read the book first to yourself, have a sense of it, have a sense of how you feel like you want to answer the questions. And actually, your children. So, if you have a child that is neurodiverse, then there might be aspects of certain books and stories that won't be helpful. And I think that's why we need more books. I really hate the way they kind of put children in a box like, this is one size fits all. And it's like, no, children grieve differently, the same way as adults. Children take to different literature. They enjoy different books, or, so it isn't one size. We just need more of it. But because it's a painful subject and adults really struggle with it, they veer away from it.
Yes. I mean, that's why it's a good idea, isn't it, to have a selection of them in schools as well. I mean, do you go into schools giving talks, or do schools have your book? Because part of that is, I remember when I was a teacher, we did a circle time and we were talking about something like healthy eating or something. They were 8 years old. And then suddenly one of the children, I remember him, Max, he said something about his granddad had died. And we went in a completely different direction because I was comfortable holding the space for it. And again, having helpful books around the classroom, a different selection of them. You can talk, it could be a rabbit, it can be a badger, it can be a mermaid. That's quite nice for younger children because it doesn't make it too intense. But if we pop it into our lives, it means that it's not the be all and end all right at the important moment. It's sort of part of life is death. And also, I think it's important, I think you mentioned, that it's important to not dance around it, to actually say they have died, they haven't passed on or gone to sleep. Tell us a bit more about that side of the language.
Well, I think it's certainly, obviously my book is quite soft, but I mean, it also is written in rhyme. I'm a great fan of rhyme books, and I always think they certainly engage me. Julian Donaldson, I love her. Gosh, I just like it. Those books are like on my bookshelf, like forget the kids. I love it because it really is, it connects children and it connects adults, and it's a softer way of being. But, we do need to use words like death. We need to use, we can use a mixture of things. I don't come from the train of thought that you must only use one term and it has to be just death. But I think that you do need to use actually what has happened, because children from different age groups and different needs and different
and different cultures
cultures, they will process things differently. So that's why we need the diversity of different books, so that we can have that collection. And I think, yes, it's about having organic conversation. So that it's comfortable. And I've had some, schools and teachers have been really open to having the book. I've had some teachers actually read the book to their class, and they've got to come back to me and ask questions very similar to the questions that you're asking, that kids will ask me as well. Where did you get your characters from? How was it for you when you lost somebody that you loved? They are actually quite curious about it. It's just creating that space. I had another teacher that held the book back from reading it to the class because she had a child that was recently bereaved, had lost a grandparent, and so they used that as their own special book so that they could talk about how this child was feeling about it. And she said it really opened the platform, just having that book to go through and kind of ask questions that wasn't directly aimed at her, but directed at the pages.
Lovely, yes.
And gave her the real opportunity to kind of connect it with this child on a very different, intimate kind of level about something that was really painful. So,
and really profound and life-changing for some children. Of course it is. So I think your book is so lovely. I mean, have you got any plans for another book?
I certainly do. I said that I would give it a year for it to kind of be out, because I'm self-published as well. So between working and publicity and everything like that, I thought I'll give myself a year. So there's 2 books. I'm kind of thinking about which one I'm going for at the moment. It's another children's book and an adult's book, which I'm thinking on the pipeline. So one is working around children and anger. I've got a real passion about that because I think that adults misinterpret anger a lot with children and struggle with it because it brings up their own anger. So I would like to do a book on anger, and another book that I think that is needed is about friendship as well, and the variations of friendships that children have, and having healthy friendships and healthy relationships.
Yes, that would be really good as well. I love it. So you've got to get cracking on those now.
I do.
So where can people find out more about you, more about your books, and where can they buy it?
So they can buy it on Amazon, or in the UK they can buy it directly from my website, and my website is www.joannapamore.com. So pretty easy. It's my name with the com at the end.
Yes.
And so you can buy it from there directly, or Amazon, and you can buy it from Waterstones. And I think there are various other places that you can, but those are the main.
But it's also a recommended book in the Sue Atkins Book Club. So go to my website if you like, click on there and have a look, and that would lead you, because we've got all the different places where people can buy it and find out more about you and the work that you do. So it's so important, and it's been so lovely to talk with you, to get the person behind the book, because it's such a lovely book, and hear you speaking about it. I do hope people now will not be scared to go off and buy your book and have those conversations, even though there's no death in the family at the moment. Let it be part of, family life. You said the word organic. I love that. And sometimes even when we've lost a pet is when conversations can start around these things. So don't shy away from it. It's a lovely book, and it will start big conversations with little people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I've been excited for it, and I'm super excited to be part of the Sue Atkins Book Club. So thank you.